In this video, we provide a tour of the IBM Data Studio Workbench. Before you start, I would like to show you this simple chart. Sometimes people forget that GUIs are just GUIs. Data Studio is another GUI, a graphical interface tool. Where you can input your commands and behind the scenes. Data Studio is actually generating other commands that will be applied to DB2. If you have a good foundation on DB2, and you work with Data Studio, you will have absolutely no problems. On the other hand, if you are new to DB2 and start working with Data Studio, in some situations, you may find things that may not be intuitive. So for example, in Data Studio, you have as we will show you in other videos, a folder for groups and users, and when you click on a user, there's an option for let's say new user or new group, so that may give you the idea that you can create a user and a group through Data Studio. And that user and group will be actually created in DB2. But in DB2, we actually do not users and groups. This is normally performed by a third-party application. Like either an operating system, which is normally the default, or LDAP for example. So again, just keep in mind, Data Studio is a graphical interface. For you, and it is recommended that you have some understanding of how DB2 works. So let's get started. Let's open Data Studio by going to Start, Programs. And look for IBM Data Studio Standalone. So I click on IBM Data Studio 2.2 and that will start. IBM Data Studio Standalone Package. The version I'm using is 2.2.1. And as you can see, Data Studio is based on Eclipse. So, if you are very familiar with Eclipse, you may want to skip this video as it may be too basic for you. The first you start Data Studio, you may get asked for a workspace location. In my case, it's not asking that because I've already established a location that I want to use for my workspace. Let me show you how that workspace looks like, or the window asking you for the workspace location. Go to File, switch Workspace, Other. And basically, this is the type of window that you will get the first time you open Data Studio. And you can specify here a path that will be used for your workspace. A workspace is very common in Eclipse-based tools. And it's basically the space or the path where you want to store all the information. Or all the files that will be created when you create projects. Data Studio, or to keep the information of the layout of your perspective. Normally, you only need to set this once. If you ever want to change the location of your workspace, then if I were to change it now, for example, then I click OK, then Data Studio will shut down and it will restart again. Pointing to the new workspace. Okay, so for now, I'm just going to click cancel since I have this set up already. Now, as mentioned before, if you are familiar with Eclipse, this is very similar to Eclipse because it is Eclipse based. On the left side, I'm showing you views on Administration Explorer, which is new on 2.2.1 in Data Studio. The Data Project Explorer, which is good normally for development. And the Data Administration Explorer is good for administration. Data Project Explorer, which is another view, is good for database development. Here you have other views, properties, and results. And here on the main area is where we have editors. Now, in Data Studio 2.2.1, we have a new window called the Launcher. And I will explain the launcher in more detail in a few minutes. Now, On this side, you can choose what are called perspectives. So the default is the database administration perspective. And a perspective is basically just giving you a different way or layout in your workbench. Depending on what you are planning to do. So, for example, let's say I want to do development or data development. So, I could click on this button and say I want to use the data perspective instead of the database administrator perspective. So I click there. And then my perspective changes. So now, as you can see, we have Data Project Explorer at the top. The Administrator Explorer is no longer shown in this perspective. And then you could pick different other views for this perspective. If you want to switch back to the administrator perspective, just click on this button. And it will take you back to that perspective. You can again click on this button and click on Other. And you will have choices for different other perspective depending on what you want to do. For now, let me click on Cancel. Now, within this perspective, you can enlarge views, for example. You can, if you want to drag views and place them in a different location. And as mentioned before, you can click at the bottom and add another view that was not present before, and so on. Now, if you want to go back to where you were or to the default perspective, just click on Window and choose Reset Perspective. You click OK to go back to the default of the database administrator perspective. And now, you are back to the original.